Hello everybody, this is Mr. Rob and welcome back to episode number 57 of the Detroit Lions franchise here on Madden NFL 21. Today we're going to take a look at the AFC training camps. Last episode we took a look at our Detroit Lions, how they're going to go into year 3 as well as some of the top NFC teams. Today I decided let's take a look at the AFC teams as well. Let's get more in depth. Let's take a look at the teams we might not see every year to see how they're doing. So if you're excited for this one, make sure you leave a like and subscribe down below, especially if you want more franchise content. We got to start off, of course, in the AFC with the defending Super Bowl champions, the Kansas City Chiefs. They won their second Super Bowl in 3 years, this time in their first season underneath coach Raheem Morris. They were able to go to the Super Bowl, and a lot of that obviously starts with the offense. Patrick Mahomes passed for 4,295 yards last year, 37 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. I mean, he's going to be the grease that makes the wheel go. Right? He's also got his two weapons, one of the best trios in football, Tyreek Hill, arguably the best wide receiver in football. He had 96 catches a season ago, 1,200 yards and 7 touchdowns, while Travis Kelce, one of the best tight ends in football, had 975 yards and 8 touchdowns. So it's weapons galore out in Kansas City. They still have Clyde Edwards-Helaire in the backfield. They also drafted Max Borghi in an interesting second-round pick. Damian Williams is also part of that trio at running back. Plenty of special weapons on that offense. Now, one part of their offense, though, is their offensive line. Their offensive line is a little thin. They did lose Mitchell Schwartz in the offseason in free agency to Cincinnati, and it's a little bit weaker than it was. It might end up holding them back a little bit. That's why I don't want to really pencil in the Chiefs as another title because of their offensive line. As well as on defense, they have a couple of weaknesses, but we'll start off with their strength up front. That D-line anchored by Chris Jones, Frank Clark. I mean, they absolutely dominated Washington in the Super Bowl that we saw. So they will continue to wreak havoc. And then they have second-year man Dylan Moses, their first-round selection from a season ago out of Alabama. He played good in his rookie campaign. He now has a year under his belt. He'll anchor those linebackers. But like I said, they're thin on the offensive line. And on defense, they're really thin in secondary. Their corners are not very, I don't want to say good, but they're ones you're going to want to test. If you play Kansas City, you're definitely going to want to throw against them. I mean, Rashad Fenton and third-round pick from last year, Cameron Bynum, are their top 2 corners currently. 2 very unproven guys. Safeties are a little bit better. They have Juan Thornhill and Tyrann Matthews, so they're set there. But those corners and offensive line could hold Kansas City back. That's why I don't want to pencil them in as your AFC favorites. Now, although Kansas City won the Super Bowl last year, they weren't the number 1 seed in the AFC. That goes to the Buffalo Bills, who finished 14-2 a season ago, and Coach Sean McDermott was named your NFL Coach of the Year. They were the best team in all of football during the regular season, but in the division round, their first playoff game, they got absolutely stomped out by the Tennessee Titans. They lost 49-14. Josh Allen threw 4 interceptions in that game, and it's left a lot of bitter taste in the mouth of Bills Mafia. So they're looking for redemption here in 2022. Speaking of Josh Allen, he had his best year a season ago, 4,500 yards, 29 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, but you're still looking for him to take that next jump. Will this be the year that Josh Allen finally solidifies himself as a top 10 quarterback in the NFL? He's still going to have plenty of help. I mean, Stephon Diggs had a very good second year in Buffalo, 95 catches, 1,200 yards, 6 touchdowns. Cole Beasley, the ultimate slot man, he had 1,000 yards as well a season ago and 8 touchdowns. And then Devin Singletary in the backfield, he had 11 touchdowns on the ground. So plenty of weapons for Allen. I do think it's going to be up to him. This is a make or break year, I think, for him. He does have a 5th-year option for next year. I'm assuming Buffalo is going to pick it up. So a couple more years for Allen to prove himself before he gets that mega deal. Now, one weapon they also picked up in last year's draft who turned into a Pro Bowler is Kyle Pitts. And we saw him make some plays in that Pro Bowl episode. If you didn't watch it, I would recommend going back and watching it. But the number 20 overall pick from last year, he had 79 catches, 883 yards, and 7 touchdowns. Obviously developed a very good chemistry with Josh Allen right off the bat. So on offense, the Bills look pretty set. They also have a very good O-line anchored by Trent Williams, who is in the second year of his deal that he signed last year. But it is the final year on his contract, so you got to wonder, when this contract is up, is Trent Williams going to finally retire? That would be a big blow to that Buffalo offensive line, so you got to think they're in win-now mode especially. On defense, Their D-line, on the other hand, is a little bit weak. Outside of Ed Oliver, there really isn't much talent on that D-line. But at linebacker, one player I want you to keep an eye on for this year is Baron Browning, the second-round pick a season ago. Buffalo's coaching staff, including Sean McDermott, are very high on him. McDermott said he might be the best linebacker he's seen coming out of college. So that's very high praise for Baron Browning. His other tandem linebackers will be Matt Milano and Tremaine Edwin. So that's a very good linebacker core, one that's going to help in the run game, help solidify that middle of the field. And they have a very good secondary as well, led by top 3 corner Tre'Davious White, who is quietly one of the best corners in the league. And at safety, they also have Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer. So Buffalo's defense is very well-rounded. Sean McDermott, he is a defensive-minded coach, so he's going to have a very good defense. And because of that, I do think I'm going to put the Buffalo Bills as my favorite in the AFC. So I'm going to go ahead and say it. I think it's going to be Bills 49ers in the Super Bowl. I won't necessarily give my selection who will win just yet. But we did talk about the Bills did lose in the divisional round, so let's talk about the team that beat the Bills, the Tennessee Titans, led by Coach Mike Vrabel. They went on a Cinderella run in the postseason before losing in the wild card round to the Kansas City Chiefs 35-21. Tennessee Titans are obviously led by MVP from a season ago, Ryan Tannehill, maybe one of the most unlikely of MVPs, but he did lead the league in passing yards and touchdowns. He had 4,900 yards, 38 touchdowns. They also did have 12 interceptions and did add 5 rushing touchdowns on the ground, so he totaled 43 total touchdowns a season ago. Now, Ryan Tannehill's very surprisingly been good the past couple years in Tennessee, and it's led to a lot of change. Remember last year they drafted Trey Lance to potentially be the starter, I think, this year, but with Tannehill playing at such an MVP level, they went ahead and traded Trey Lance to Chicago, who we saw last episode. So no longer Trey Lance behind him. It is fully Ryan Tannehill's gig. And in that Trey Lance trade, they ended up picking up David Montgomery from Chicago. He was one of the key pieces. And Montgomery will be a nice change of pace back, I think, for Tennessee. They do have Derrick Henry, who is, the strongest back in the NFL. But it's always good to have a 1-2 punch. Montgomery last year, 6 touchdowns in Chicago. He should be that nice pass-catching back for Ryan Tannehill. Speaking of Derrick Henry, 1,081 yards, 8 touchdowns on the ground. So he will be the workhorse for that offense. In the receiving game, they look a little thin. They have A.J. Brown and Corey Davis, but they do have Devonta Smith. So it's actually, I would say, a quietly good receiving class. And that's not even mentioning Adam Humphries, who last year had 1,500 yards and 14 touchdowns. 1,500 yards led the league, so Adam Humphries also had a pretty crazy year. This is a very interesting Tennessee Titans team. And to say all that, they finished 8-8 a season ago. So they weren't even the winners of the AFC South. That was the Jacksonville Jaguars. Justin Fields had a very good rookie year, but I do think Tennessee will take that throne this year. On defense, they're led by Daquan Jones and Poona Ford up the middle, as well as at linebacker, Jaylen Brown, Rashaan Evans, and Harold Landry. And then the secondary, they have a nice blend of young players and veterans. Adoree Jackson, first-round pick this year, Kyle Elam, top free safety Kevin Byard, and then last year's first-round pick Colby Harvell-Peel anchors that secondary. So very interesting blend in Tennessee. I'm really excited to see what they do. Can Ryan Tannehill follow up on that MVP season? Now, the last division in the AFC is, in my mind, without a doubt, the toughest division in the AFC, and that is the AFC North. I feel very confident that the Chiefs will win the West, and the Bills will win the East. I think the Titans will win the South. Maybe the Jaguars give them a run for their money again. Maybe the Houston Texans start to click. We have no idea what's happening with Deshaun Watson. But in the AFC North, I think every single team could make the postseason for the first time in NFL history, since they did expand the playoffs. But if I had to pick one team to win the division, I do think it's going to be the Cleveland Browns. They finished 10-6 a season ago, and they're just 2 years removed from making it to the Super Bowl. Coached by Kevin Stefanski, I think they finally found themselves a good man in the headset. And the Browns, they actually did lose to the Chiefs in the division round 31-28, so they put up a good fight against Kansas City. Had a 21-point fourth quarter to almost edge them out. But this is a very good Browns team led by Baker Mayfield, who has finally taken that next step. Baker Mayfield is a bona fide superstar. Passed for 4,400 yards a season ago, 32 touchdowns, so only 6 interceptions. So Baker Mayfield is that leader. He will be a star for years in the future, and Cleveland Browns fans can rest knowing they finally have a franchise quarterback. Now, next to Mayfield in the backfield is Nick Chubb. You obviously got to mention Nick Chubb. He was a very important part of that reason why they made the Super Bowl 2 years ago. Remember, Chubb and Hunt were that 1-2 running back duo, and then Washington kind of followed that suit this past season to make the Super Bowl in their own. And coincidentally, they have Kareem Hunt now. But Chubb, he basically got first carries in the backfield, didn't really have to split it with anybody, and he turned it into a 1,500-yard season, 17 touchdowns, and added 4 receiving touchdowns as well. So Nick Chubb, phenomenal year as the bell cow back. And then the receiving game, you have Odell Beckham, who did miss 4 games last year due to injury. He was actually out in the meeting that we had against Cleveland. If you remember, we beat Cleveland a season ago, and ever since they lost to us, they just went and just rattled off victory after victory. But they'll have hopefully a full season of Odell Beckham, and then next to him they'll have Jarvis Landry, as well as second-year man Amon-Ra St. Brown. And then tight end, you can't forget about Austin Hooper. Austin Hooper is a great security blanket for Mayfield. So the Browns offense, they're looking pretty formidable, and they have arguably the best offensive line in the AFC, top to bottom, a very solid unit. On defense, their front four is also still a force. They dominate in the trenches. Of course, Myles Garrett leads that unit, 18.5 sacks a season ago. At linebacker, they are a little weak in my opinion, but they used a first-round pick on Cameron McGrone out of Michigan. He will start at middle linebacker, it looks like, out of the break, so he'll have to learn fast and on the fly if he wants to be that defensive leader. Now, in the secondary behind him, though, it's a solid unit. Denzel Ward, Greedy Williams, James Bradbury, Grant Delpit, Carl Joseph, a lot of hungry players in that secondary who are ball hawks and have a knack for turning over the football. So I think the Cleveland Browns have the edge in the AFC North, but a team that I think could be a surprise is the team that's in the same state, the Cincinnati Bengals, who a season ago finished 5-11. They were the worst team in the AFC North, one of the worst teams in all of NFL, led by Zach Taylor, but they went out and they went on a spending spree. Definitely the biggest spenders in free agency. I'm going to list off all the names. First off, J.J. Watt. 2 years, $37.7 million. That's a huge signing in itself. But they also got Mitchell Schwartz, who at Michigan came over from Kansas City. 1 year, $15.5 million. Nick Boyle, a solid tight end from Baltimore, division rival a season ago. 4 years, $28.64 million. And then Desmond Trufant, our former Lion, he signed a 1 year, $6.14 million contract. So the Cincinnati Bengals, with 4 big-time signings. Now, you also can't forget about third-year man Joe Burrow, who had 3,800 yards a season ago, 27 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. Took a little bit of a step back, I would say. He didn't play nearly as good as he did his rookie year, but hopefully Joe Burrow hopefully it was just a sophomore slump for Joe Burrow. Now, obviously, Joe Mixon next to him, 1,300 yards, 12 touchdowns on the ground. He is a very good back, sneaky good, especially in a division that has Nick Chubb. And then on offense, they also added number 4 overall pick George Pickens out of Georgia, who was maybe one of the top pound-for-pound best players in the draft. He'll tee up with T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd for a solid trio. And then Mitchell Schwartz addition definitely solidifies the offensive line, in my opinion. They're pretty good from top to bottom, and Joe Burrow should have a lot more time in the pocket. On defense, the D-line, they're very good. J.J. Watt, Carl Lawson, DJ Reader, Geno Atkins. That's a solid front four. It's going to be very hard to run against Cincinnati. And for a team that plays Nick Chubb twice a year, that's definitely a good thing. And the linebackers, that's, I think, where their weak spot is. I think they aren't as good. Not a lot of good talent there. They have Jermaine Pratt, maybe. And then the secondary, Mackenzie Alexander, Desmond Trufant, William Jackson III. They're okay. And then Xavier Woods and Von Bell at safety. So Cincinnati, I think, could push Cleveland in the North. Now, the last team that we'll highlight in the North, as well as in today's episode, is the Baltimore Ravens. Can't forget about the Baltimore Ravens, especially with Lamar Jackson at quarterback. But they have underwhelmed in the past 2 years, finishing 7-9 a season ago, and haven't made the playoffs those 2 years. So you got to think, maybe John Harbaugh is on the hot seat. But speaking of Lamar Jackson, he still is a difference maker when he's on the field. He was hurt last season, missed a total of 5 games, so maybe that's why Baltimore didn't get off to a hot start. But when he's on the field, he is a difference maker. They did sign Nick Mullins to be the backup, so a little bit of experience behind Jackson in case he gets hurt again. Also have a lot of young wide receivers. No one on that squad is older than 25, so the wide receiver room is filled with young talent. You just got to decide which ones step up. We know Hollywood Brown steps up, and they also spent a first-round pick, number 9 overall, on Garrett Wilson. So another young playmaker to add to that group. Now they still also have Mark Andrews. Nick Boyle did leave, but Mark Andrews is still a bona fide star at tight end, so you still have him to be Jackson's security blanket as well. And the offensive line, they did take a hit. Orlando Brown did leave in free agency. It's still good because you do have Ronnie Stanley at that other tackle position, but losing a player like Orlando Brown on that right side does indeed hurt. Now on defense, this is where they could use some work, I think. Their D-line isn't, I mean, it's okay. They got a pretty solid front seven: Calais Campbell, Matthew Judon, Patrick Queen. So they do have some pieces. They are missing in those other spots. Maybe another edge rusher or another good coverage linebacker would help. But the secondary is their strength on defense. They have Marlon Humphrey, Marcus Peters, Tavon Young, Earl Thomas, who seems to have made up from a couple seasons ago. He spent one season in Los Angeles as a Charger 2 years ago and returned to Baltimore. So it looks like whatever beef he had with the coaching staff has made itself up. And then Chuck Clark at the other safety spot. But be on the lookout for third-round pick Jordan Battle, who they took this year out of Alabama. I think he could be a stud at strong safety for them. But that's the 3 teams we're going to highlight in the North. We haven't even talked about the Pittsburgh Steelers, who actually won the division. So, like I said, I think the AFC North will be a tough division, especially in the AFC. That's going to do it, though, for the training camp previews. Hope you guys enjoyed these kind of episodes. Give you some insight in not just our team, but some other teams that we face. We will face the AFC East this year, so we'll see the Bills, we'll see the Dolphins, Patriots, and Jets. But also want to shine a light on those teams we haven't seen yet. We haven't played the West, and we haven't played the West. So, but got to give the defending champs their credit. But that's going to do it for me in this one. Next episode will be the preseason highlights before we finally kick off the regular season of year 3. So if you're excited for this one, make sure to leave a like and subscribe down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. This is Mr. Rob, and I'll see you in the next one.